There has been an uptick in talk about this male loneliness as spurred on by multiple articles that have been published in the past few months discussing said quote-unquote male loneliness, which, by uptick of talk, I mean months-long Twitter discourses on the subject. Cishet male loneliness roughly translates to I refuse to emotionally lean on my friends or platonic partnerships in any way, and I have purposefully self-isolated, even though I have all of the power to not do that. This has been analyzed on Twitter to hell and back, so to not be redundant, I'll just say that there is no special male loneliness. That is just loneliness. Men do not experience a loneliness that a marginalized gender does not. And if they do, it is self-imposed for the sake of, keeping power. So I find it a bit difficult to sympathize with a cishet male complaining about loneliness, rather than go through all of that in depth, because once again, it has been analyzed to hell and back. I would rather go a different route here and make the argument that marginalized people are way more lonely than the average cishet white dude due to systemic things that they cannot control, unlike cishet white dudes that choose not to lean on their platonic support systems. You're telling me this cishet dude is more lonely than a disabled person on year 3 of the pandemic? You're more lonely than a disabled person that has been forced to isolate for 3 years in order to protect their own life? Didn't think so. Lots of marginalized groups are, in fact, lonely, and there is a loneliness epidemic amongst marginalized groups because of things majorly out of their control, like being fucking hated by everybody. I basically just did a bunch of research reading, and I have several statistics to back up this claim. In a research paper called Minority Stress and Loneliness in a Global Sample of Sexual Minority Adults, the Roles of Social Anxiety, Social Inhibition, and Community Involvement, I have a quote here from this paper. Respondents were 7,856 sexual minority adults aged 18 to 88 years from 85 countries who completed an online survey. Results of structural equation modeling indicated that marginalization was positively correlated with both social and emotional loneliness, and that part of this relationship was indirect via proximal minority stress factors, especially stigma, preoccupation, and in turn, social anxiety and social inhibition. I liked this particular paper because it wasn't just based in like the United States or the UK. They, spoke to people from 88 different countries, and it was a pretty large sample size. So this was probably the best quote I could find. For some reason, the United Kingdom does a lot of research on queer loneliness that the United States does not. Even the fucking Surgeon General just didn't fucking bother to study loneliness in marginalized groups or, queer people. He just fucking was like, yeah, they're more likely to be lonely. But this was also a good article because it went into the reasons why that is. I mean, you could definitely come to some critical thinking solutions as to why that might be, but they have data that backs it up. A lot of the data I found about queer youth and loneliness was once again based in the UK, and it was surrounding the lockdowns that happened in 2020 and 2021. Not that the loneliness of the lockdowns isn't important to acknowledge, but of course, loneliness is going to skyrocket in a social lockdown. I want just in general numbers, not lockdown numbers. Although I will say that one of the studies did say that queer youths in the UK were like 2 times more likely to be lonely in lockdown, was the statistic I found. Although it wasn't entirely relevant to my thesis. It kind of relevant. I did find, however, a statistic about older adults in the United States that are queer, and I will read that one. In a research paper called Social Relationships and Loneliness in Late Adulthood, Disparities by Sexual Orientation, older LGB adults were significantly lonelier than their heterosexual counterparts, similarly due to a lower likelihood of having a partner and, to a lesser extent, lower levels of family support and greater friend strain. I wonder who's responsible for that one. Ronald Reagan. I will meet you in hell with a baseball bat. And it's not just queer folks that deal with a disproportionate loneliness. It's other minority groups and marginalized groups as well. The Cigna Group conducted a survey at the end of 2021 that indicated that not only were men and women equally lonely, but marginalized groups tend to be, way more lonely. From underrepresented racial groups are more likely to be lonely. 75 of Hispanic adults and 68 of Black African American adults are classified as lonely, at least 10 points higher than what was seen among the total adult population of 58%. People with lower incomes are lonelier than those with higher incomes. Nearly 2/3 of adults, 63%, earning less than $50,000 per year are classified as lonely. This is 10 points higher than those earning $50,000 or more. Relatedly, almost 3 in 4 people, 72%, who receive health benefits through Medicaid are classified as lonely, which is substantially more than 55% of adults covered by private, employer, or union-provided health insurance benefits. Men and women have roughly the same likelihood of loneliness. 57% of men and 59% of women reported being lonely. Loneliness levels were close to equal in 2018 as well, with 53% of men and 54% of women reporting feelings of loneliness. In 2019, data showed a spike in loneliness among men, with 63% experiencing loneliness compared to 58% of women. So at one point there was a spike, but it went back down. Adults with physical health issues are approximately 50% more likely to be lonely than those with strong physical health. 77% of adults classified as having fair or poor physical health are experiencing loneliness, while only half, 50% of those with excellent or very good physical health are lonely. In addition, adults classified as lonely are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with or receiving care for a range of health issues, including sleep disorders, weight problems, substance use, and others. Americans with mental health issues are more than twice as likely to be lonely than those with strong mental health. 1 in 4 adults are classified as having fair or poor mental health, and among them, 85% are lonely compared to 42% of adults with excellent or very good mental health. 1 in 3 lonely adults are currently diagnosed with or receiving medical treatment for a behavioral or mental health condition, such as anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, etc., more than double the 14% of non-lonely adults diagnosed with or receiving treatment for such conditions. So, like I said earlier, you as a cishet male are not more lonely than a disabled person. I would say that being a disabled person, mentally or physically, in post-pandemic society here, is way more lonely than being a cishet male. And it is based upon things that are outside of their control, like, the fact that everybody just wants to fucking kill them all the time. So what's my point? My point is that cishet men don't have a special male loneliness that marginalized genders do not feel. My other point is that the cherry-picked statistic that these articles keep using about male loneliness do not break down that statistic any further to give me any information about the race, the sexuality, the economic status, the disability status of these men, and therefore it does not give me a holistic analysis of that loneliness. Because I can assure you with full certainty that that statistic would change the perception of those rating it drastically if these factors were taken into account, but they weren't. They just did a general male loneliness panel and decided that it's women's problem. My other point is that the cishet white male loneliness is not based upon factors of marginalization or things out of their control. It is self-imposed to, keep other men at a distance, not rely on those men emotionally as a means of, keeping power in society. Because if they had just traded some of that power for emotional vulnerability, they wouldn't be where they are now. Cishet white dudes are not more lonely than marginalized people. And there isn't a special male loneliness that requires more attention. That, my friends, is just loneliness.